right, everyone. Welcome. My name is Dominic. Thank you for tuning in to the Comic Book Report. I'm back for another interview, and this time I'm very excited to introduce David from IronClad Comics. Welcome, David.
Thank you for having me here.
Awesome. So just a little quick primer about David, in case you guys are coming in kind of blind here. I did a couple videos showcasing his series, The Warden. He not only wrote this comic, but he is also a co-founder for the whole publisher imprint, IronClad Comics. So without further ado, David, what can you tell me about IronClad?
Yep. So IronClad Comics is a brand new publishing company from Ohio. Actually, we've been around for about a year so far. The Warden issues 1 and 2, which came out in a collection, which you read for the first time, that was released in April of last year, and so now we're on issue 4, which just came out in July. So we're moving along pretty well here. But really, the main purpose of IronClad Comics was to kind of create an alternative for, or to kind of create an alternative for the next generation of people. So we kind of sell it as being the next mythology, or the mythology of the 21st century, or a new myth, basically that type of thing. Whereas Marvel and DC were kind of this 20th century myth, where they kind of created that, like, this Greek mythology of America in the 20th century. We're trying to do the next generation thing. So that's kind of the basis for our entire company.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, like I said, I've really been enjoying it. Viewers, I'll try to link the videos, but like he was saying, I reviewed their first 2 issues in like a trade paperback collection, and then I recently reviewed the first 3 issues in single issues. So I'm very much hooked on the Warden. I don't know, going more specifically down to the Warden now, this first arc, do you guys have an end in sight as far as the first story arc for the Warden? Like,
Yep.
how many issues you're hoping to go with it?
Mm-hmm. So the first book is 6 issues long. The first arc is 6 issues long. So you already read halfway through it. Basically, we do our books in 6 to 7 issues a piece. And basically, they'll be collected into a larger graphic novel at the end. So we kind of treat it more as like kind of a mixture between normal comics, but also kind of like normal novels itself. So kind of the graphic novel sense. But actually, overall, for this universe, so, me and Cody, my partner, we started this company, and I'm 22 and he's 24, and we're both pretty young, and so we thought, it's gonna take a lot for people to trust us, to make good stuff. So we before we even started making anything, we built a company. So we both got business degrees from college, and specifically focusing on entrepreneurship, marketing, and finance and stuff like that, to be able to build this company. And then after that, we actually, it's kind of funny. Many years ago, I wrote a book during COVID called Project Olympus. That was on Indiegogo, and it kind of failed in a way. But the real issue that happened is we had an artist doing it for 6 months under a 6-month contract, and it took a year and a half actually. So it was a late book, but in that time, we realized that actually our company wasn't that good, because Project Olympus was just a book written by a kid who was still in high school, and all it was about was just big muscles and guns and powers and being edgy and stuff like that, as the classic teenage stuff is. Sure. And during that year we had to wait, we were like, wait a minute, we can actually make something that's meaningful here, with some purpose and some substance behind it, that actually can be these next heroes, the next generation of role models for Generation Z, Generation Alpha, and Beta, as we keep going on. Like, we really make something impactful here. So that's what we did. And so actually, the IronClad universe is 45 books long, and 45 of the books, the full first arc of the Warden. So each book will be about 6 to 7 issues long, and we've created the very beginning, which is the Warden, but we've also created the end. It's already all done. So basically, kind of like as Tolkien did, who wrote the Lord of the Rings, kind of made everything beforehand, and kind of really built the world years before he even wrote the first book. We did the same thing in order to make this something that's actually substantial, with a beginning and an end, to show you where to start and where to go without any confusion.
Awesome. Very cool. It's almost funny to hear a comic book universe that is so, I don't want to say streamlined, but with the big 2, for example, Marvel and DC, it's not uncommon to have multiverse and so much kind of, what's the word? Like, is this canon? Is it not? Do we need a retcon? Do we need to just reset everything? And don't get me wrong, I love the big 2. I mean, you can see I got some books here, but like, really cool to hear you guys plotting out the trajectory of where you're going, and you have an end in mind, and I think that one of the things that excites me hearing that is because the Warden, essentially, I'm not trying to reduce it, but essentially it is a grounded kind of vigilante-like comic book. It's definitely in a superhero-like genre.
Yes.
But something I see a lot, again, especially more at the big two, but it's kind of like you write these stories that just kind of recycle with no end in sight, and it's sometimes hard to have even kind of narrative finality sometimes, because you always feel like you're getting serialized chapters. You don't really have them. Unless you're in a pocket universe, or like I said, maybe independent spaces, you see it a bit more. But I'm excited to see that, and I think that I'm really encouraged. Just to kind of brag on you a little bit, hopefully it doesn't make you uncomfortable. One of the things I loved about the Warden, and I spoke about it a little bit in my videos, was just I like how character grounded it is. Like the couple characters I've had introduced to me so far, in 3 issues in, I really love that the characters don't all just feel like mouthpieces for the same voice. They feel very distinctive. There's, in some ways, something archetypal about them, but in another way, they feel fresh. They feel lived in. I feel like you're just putting the camera in on this world that's already there. And to me, that's a mark of writing, first off, but then also just characterization. And I think everything for me begins with that grounding. And I'm curious, is that where you go to, or are you plot and then character? Is everything kind of braided so much that it's hard? Because I just think characterization is something you do so well.
Yeah, actually, that's a funny thing to bring up, because I'm more of a character person and Cody's more of a plot person, and that makes a good partnership, actually. So I start with the characters always, and then I make the plot around them, and then he starts with the plot and then puts the characters in them. And the good thing about having a partnership is that we sit down and we'll tear each other's stuff apart. We'll tear it to shreds, this is terrible, that's not working, this is bad. And we're like a cool two-headed monster that's able to make this really good product. There's a funny story about George Lucas, I always like to say, is when he wrote the first 3 Star Wars movies, he had his wife read over all of them. And then when he wrote the next 3, he didn't have her read over any of them. And he has kind of turned them in. And you can see there's a distinct quality difference. And I think there is a purpose and some power to it, just having a person who's kind of like on your same level of quality and commitment, checking over your stuff and telling you it's not going to work, we got to do this better. And I think that's kind of what we had. And that's why the Warden is able to be so good, is because not because it's me, it's because of our team. It's because how we work together and really make this thing something that's actually impactful.
Yeah. Well, I've been impressed, man. Honestly, I could say that, and I think hearing how young you guys are, it's even more impressive. I'm really fascinated by all the ground you've been able to cover thus far, and I'm excited to see what's coming up. If you don't mind me sharing, because again, I know that you guys have like a great website, but I've also seen some like Kickstarter campaigns and stuff. Yes. Can you share a little bit about your approach to how you're marketing the Warden, or kind of how you guys are moving this for people that are interested in getting on board?
Yep. So IronClad Comics mainly has a few different channels right now. So the first of which is that we have our website, which you can buy our books on, but also we have several other things which I'll get into later. But we also have Kickstarter and conventions. So Kickstarter is kind of, we put the books at first. It's the initial kind of crowdfunding phase, but also generating interest, because Kickstarter is not only a good place to get funding, but also a good place to build marketing, get interest for your stuff. And that is what we kind of use it for. So once we move from Kickstarter, we then move it to our website, and we go to conventions with it. So conventions, we just started going to conventions. Like I said, we've only been around for about a year so far. So we just started going to conventions last summer. And so far we've been to, I think, 15, 16 since then.
Wow, awesome.
And we've sold over 800 copies of all 3 issues combined so far. And like people are really liking it. Like the thing is, we haven't got a review below four stars yet. We've gotten, like, no one's ever said like this is garbage. This is trash. Everyone's like, yeah, this is great stuff. And I think a lot of it has to do with how we kind of approach it. And I think part of that is the way Alan Moore did, where he said he wanted to treat comics more seriously than they deserved. Not to say that comics don't deserve to be taken seriously, but I think when you treat anything more seriously than you think it deserves, I think it comes out a better product. And so for our inspiration, because you mentioned serialization earlier, in our personal opinions, this almost closing on 100 years of history for Marvel and DC, it leads to a loss of the initial characters, in our opinion. You kind of lose the meaning and the substance and what they stood for when they were first created, and then it doesn't mean anything anymore. And it's kind of sad to see, because you can see, like, our personal opinion, we like one universe, one timeline, one path. That's a whole entire thing for our company. We don't want to see a billion different versions of the same character. That's not our cup of tea, because we think that a character should mean something. And when you have a million different Supermans running around, what do they all mean? They don't really mean anything. It's just kind of like, oh, that's nice to look at for a second, but it's not really anything I'm going to sit down and like be a part of for years to come. And so that's kind of our thing. And we also like to use inspiration from classical literature and mythology. So we love Gothic literature. We love like Frankenstein and Dracula and H.G. Wells and stuff like that, but also Greek, Norse, that mythology as well. There's so much good stuff there that I think can be used to bring into the 21st century and kind of show those stories again with a modern twist, but also with unique and original characters. Because in our opinion, something new is just a combination of a dozen old things. That's kind of how you do it. I mean, like, that's what Batman was. Sherlock Holmes, Zorro, and Dracula roll into one, and then he got him. That's the formula for Batman. So we're kind of doing something similar in that way.
No, absolutely, and I that makes me excited to hear for what you guys have in the future. Like you guys strike a chord, even just for me personally as a comic consumer. I really love the kind of grounded, kind of almost gritty street level vigilante stories. Like, and don't get me wrong, I love galactic hero stories. I love kind of Superman can lift up a planet kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But the stuff that really gets me, especially for a superhero comic, is like your gritty, you're almost noir. It's really like city feeling. And I feel like when I first opened the pages of the Warden, like I experienced that. I experienced this kind of grit. The artist you have in the book as well is phenomenal. I think just the world feels so lived in. The coloring is just beautiful, and like I said, you sell it. The world feels lived in from moment one, and I think that was just such a great backdrop for you guys. If you don't mind me asking, though, so we talked a little bit about IronClad, kind of your guys' vision behind it, kind of what you're hoping to bring to the comic book landscape. We've talked about some of your distribution streams or arms of your company where you can find it, like Kickstarter, and you guys at conventions, and your website is a landing page and stuff to see. But I'd love to get into a little bit more about just questions for you personally, if you don't mind me asking.
Yeah, sure.
Have you been I guess I shouldn't even assume this. I assume as a comic creator that you are a fan of comics, or is that even of sales? Okay, cool. So my question next is perhaps a low-bearing fruit, but what got you into comics, and what were some of your early favorites that really left an impact on you?
Yeah, so my favorite superhero was the Hulk, actually, when I was a kid.
Wow, okay.
And my first comic book I ever read was World War Hulk. And the only reason I wanted it was because I wanted to show the kids on the bus that the Hulk could beat up everybody. But I actually read it, and I liked it. And I was like, let me read some more stuff here. And so that kind of started. And that was like, I was like probably 14, 15 years old at the time. And so after that, I've been like reading tons of comics since then. And right now, I mean, like, the Hulk is still one of my favorite characters, but like, there's been so many other characters I've been exposed to. Like, I don't know. Like, I think I've seen so many different characters, so many different stories, and like, I've read so much stuff that I think it's like really helped me to be a better writer and know what would work and know what doesn't work.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like I just have to ask, and maybe it's again my own selfish reasons. My favorite superhero character by far is Daredevil, and I'm curious, are you at all a Daredevil fan?
Yep. Well, that's Cody's favorite superhero, actually, and Daredevil's in my top 10. So I love Daredevil. In fact, so the Warden, basically my purpose for creating him was to make a street level Superman, in a sense, because I like Superman's actually my favorite superhero now. And I was like, I'm not a huge fan. Like you said, you like gritty, grounded stuff, more raw. So I was like, I want to get something more like that, but also have some Superman-like qualities to it. So like, I basically took Superman, I took Hercules and Beowulf and all these different types of these like classical heroic champions, and put them into Detroit in 2004 and made him into a vigilante. And that was kind of the Warden right there, kind of this noble character that represents this great power, but he doesn't use his power to, punch holes through people or, push over buildings. It's more about what he can do to save people. In fact, one of the lines is in issue 3 is that he says he's strong enough where no one has to die. he can save the cop involved, he can save the victim involved, and he can also save the criminal even. He's so strong and he's bulletproof and he can't be hurt that no one has to die. It's like almost a non-situation for him, so he can save everyone. And that was kind of the reason for his power set, kind of this more of this of a saving thing rather than just like, oh, look at me, I can bench press 10,000 pounds and toss a car or something. It was more about what he can do to save people, and that's kind of what Superman is.
Yeah, very, very cool. That's a really fun mix of things to do. I can definitely see that even with what I've read so far. If I may ask, I'm just curious a little bit with your process. Obviously, like I said, I'm a fan of the books I've read so far. Has there been anything writing the Warden so far that has surprised you?
In what sense you mean?
Yeah, okay, that's a great question. I think to drill it down a little bit further, like in the process of writing this comic, has there been anything that just, whether it was unexpected with what happened, like I'm curious, being someone who has outlined and kind of plotted the trajectory of the story, have you been pretty rigid to that, or has there been a little bit of your writing and things kind of maybe within still that structure kind of go in ways that have surprised you, or do you feel like narratively it's been pretty on track? I guess, does that make sense?
Well, so actually, the Warden has kind of had a rocky history in its original conception. I've actually never talked about this in an interview before. So great question. So originally, I've written the Warden, the first book. I've written it 3 times actually, and it's the first time I wrote it. I made him into a bad guy in an accident. I was still a young kid, and I was like, oh, he's a big, edgy guy. He's like, he's like Rorschach and blah 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 blah. And he's like, and he killed people back then too. And then me and Cody are reading it, and we're like, wow, this guy sucks. This guy's like ripping people's arms off and like punching their kneecaps in. It's like, yeah, no, not. We gotta revisit that. And so actually, just as we've changed as people, I think I've grown more mature, and I've kind of become more of a hopeful, optimistic person in general.
Yeah.
It made the Warden more of that, and so he's kind of like this light in this dark world, because I think the world, there's terrible things that happen in the world, but also heroes exist and heroes can exist, and that's kind of the point. So I still like the gritty noir, kind of raw setting, where there's horrible crimes and horrible things happening. But it's just not good when there's no hope to it, because like if you're just watching, if you just want to watch a horrible, like super serious thing, just go watch the news. Like in my opinion, like if you want to have this like really dark things happening, I think you need to have a character, or at least one character, that's kind of this light in the darkness, and that's what the Warden is supposed to be. That's what he became, actually.
I love that. So the Warden himself ultimately was kind of surprising in the fact that it evolved.
Yes, and I'm so happy that he did, because he would have sucked otherwise.
I love that. Very cool, man. Okay, so a couple more questions. So, I mean, if I can ask, I know you have your partner in this business, Cody. How did you guys meet or first decide to even go in on this together, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, so we met. Well, we went to the same high school, actually, but we met seriously for the first time at a bonfire shortly after COVID. And at that time, I was already getting Project Olympus, my first comic, drawn and produced. And I found out he loved comics, because actually I had a lot of friends, and not a lot of them were as into comics as me, or they didn't take it as seriously as me. Like oh yeah, superheroes fighting and stuff like that, cool costumes, all that kind of stuff, and that's cool and all. But I was sitting like, oh, the philosophy of it, like kind of an ultra nerd,
Yeah.
And but Cody was the first person who actually like was interested in that kind of stuff. And so it's funny, I sat him down after the bonfire, and I kept him up till like 3 a.m. in the morning, telling the entire plot of my story. And a few weeks later, he's like, yeah, I got some money, I'm gonna join you. And so we kind of became partners after that, 50-50 partners actually, because we always say, like, because basically the 45 books, half of them are his and half of them are mine.
Yeah.
Like, and even the ones I do take the lead on, even the ones he takes the lead on, about 20% of that is him, and about 80% of it is me. So kind of we alternate, and there's no one product where we're like working on it by ourselves. We want to be a cohesive universe that works.
Very cool. Well, I'm excited. I'm really excited, man. I'm excited to see what you guys have coming up. I know you said issue 4 just dropped in July.
Yep. And it's currently it met its goal, and now it's in the late pledges. So basically, you can still buy it right now, and it will go to our website in a couple of months.
Okay. Awesome, man. Very cool. So, man, you're getting 2/3 of the way through that first arc, you know, and I do want to encourage people just maybe that are seeing this on the channel and this is your first time hearing it. You might be surprised. I don't cover a ton of single issues on my channel. I made an exception with the Warden. It came across my desk, so to speak, and I really just loved it. And I want to encourage people that whether you're a single issue collector or you like to wait to the collected edition, there's a lot of bang for your buck with each issue. Like, I feel like there's at least a substantive development with each issue. You know, that first collection I read that was actually the first 2 issues kind of sandwiched together.
Yep.
It was like a meaty chunk of narrative, you know, and then issue 3 also, you know, added some more layering, even with some of the supporting characters. I don't want to spoil too much here, but I've been really excited, you know, and honestly, it's been kind of a venture for me, someone, again, who does more collected edition, and I know that's ultimately a goal, but to kind of dip my toe into the water of single issue releases and having these books to look forward to, you know, and I just want to encourage anyone, if this sounds interesting to you, definitely check out their Kickstarter, check out their website. If you're at a con, see if they're going to be at it, you know, hit them up, because this is a really cool project. If you want to see more on it too, you can check out the videos. Like I said, I'll try to link just some of my thoughts covering it. You can see a little bit of the art, things like that. But really, a really impressive product here. But flipping it back to you more directly, just to get to know you again a little bit more as a creator. You know, we talked about how you kind of got into comics and the Hulk and stuff. I know you've also name dropped Alan Moore, who is, of course, a very prolific and philosophical-minded kind of comic writer and creator. I would love to hear, what are some of your like shortlist go-to favorite comic book recommendations? And they can be, you know, like graphic novels, they can be comic book runs, whatever, kind of blank slate here. I'm curious, like, what are some of your particular favorites?
So basically anything written by Jeff Loeb and drawn by Tim Sale. So me and Cody both are big fans of that duo. And like Long Halloween, Dark Victory, Superman for All Seasons, those 4 Marvel color books like Hulk Gray, Daredevil Yellow, Spider-Man Blue, Captain America White. Those are some of our all-time favorite comics of all time. And also there's a few others that most of our big top ones are kind of New Frontier. That was one of our big favorite ones. And then also the Marvels by I can't remember who. I think it was Kurt Busiek and Alex Ross. And then Kingdom Come. And I recently read one of my favorite comics of all time. Actually, I recently read it was called I think it was called Justice League: World's Greatest Superheroes by Paul Dini and Alex Ross. And that was one of the best comics I ever read in my entire life. And like we're huge fans of the DC animated series. In fact, we kind of use that as part of our inspiration for our books as well. Kind of as the structure of like having individual series of each character, and then having, you know, kind of team ups and stuff later down the line, kind of that type of thing, where it's like it's we're not trying to force anything to happen. Kind of like how there's a lot of issues with like some superhero movies recently, where it's just like trying to force things to kind of, oh yeah, we're all together in the same place all of a sudden, and it's like, but we're kind of doing things more natural. We're like, characters only join together if it makes sense, and it'll be very rare and a very big thing, if at all. So that was one of the main things for us, actually.
Very, very cool. I guess for me, another thing I'm curious about, you mentioned recently going to some of these conventions. Can you share any anecdotes from some of your ventures at these? I think you said somewhere over a dozen cons you guys have done even in the last year. Any anecdotes you could share, or something you could hype up for people that maybe have always wanted to check out a comic convention, or I don't know, just something you want to share?
Yeah. So some of our favorite experiences are like, when people buy the books and they come back and they say, "Wow, it was great." But I think my favorite experiences, I think Cody would agree, is when there's like kind of like younger kids come up, and like the thing is, like sometimes when you go to a con, not everything is super kid appropriate all the time.
Yeah.
And so it's really nice being able to have stuff for like, 10, 11, 12, 13-year-old kids. And it really gives us a lot of joy too, because like, the parents don't have to worry about anything in there. And also like, it's a good story and a good role model for them to kind of experience. And that's some of our favorite stuff. But like, honestly, like just talking to people and you really learn that there's a lot of people who are just like you. And I think it's a really important thing. I think people think there's no one like me, but like I think when you go to these conventions, so like people like love the same stuff you do. They want more stuff that you're trying to give out, or like you're trying to promote and stuff like that. Or that's your favorite. And I think it's a really cool thing to experience kind of this community. And that's one of the big things with our company is really trying to kind of revive or hopefully give a little boost to the comic book community, because in some ways I think reading comics itself has kind of like plateaued a bit lately. And I know we're super young, so we haven't been around for very long. But like I think we want to be able to bring it back to like the top of the of the echelon of everything. That's kind of our goal, to kind of jumpstart things, and even hopefully someday help out stores again too, because we really want to be able to promote stores just as like game stores are huge these days. We want to help make comic books just as big. That's kind of one of our main things. And that community is very important to us.
Yeah, absolutely. Very cool. Awesome. I'm trying to think of what other questions I have for you. I'm really thrilled to have an opportunity to speak to you. Like I said, the Warden has now been in my life for a while now. Between when I first got that first paperback, I think shortly after you released that, to now, it's been, I don't know if it's been a year, but probably, pretty
close. Yeah. I mean, I can give a short little synopsis of the Warden for everybody listening.
Let's hear it. Yeah. Absolutely.
So basically, the Warden follows a prison guard named Henry Hunt, born in 2004. He's born with the extraordinary powers of a supernatural, mysterious origin. He puts on a costume, starts fighting crime, but with that, of course, comes some consequences. So he's being pursued by a reporter, by the cops, and just recently, a government agency trying to take him down and use him for nefarious purposes, or their motivation is kind of unclear so far. But really, the whole thing was with the war was kind of make him this. I really like the idea of people being born with their powers. In our universe, actually, there's kind of these two different types of superhumans. So we've kind of married the natural and supernatural explanations for heroes together, kind of taking the mythology and the science fiction and putting it all together to make it make sense. So like where the science fails, the supernatural picks up. That's kind of how we kind of play it. So we kind of blend those two things together. So in our universe, there are two superhumans, like I said. There are those who are born with their abilities, like the Warden, kind of a divine spark bestowed upon them, almost like a calling and a purpose given to them. And then there's those who obtain their power through evil and corruption, and kind of falling down this track of like murder or things like that, and become more inhuman. They kind of abandon their humanity for the sake of power and become almost more animal-like. And so, in that sense, the Warden is kind of like our demigods. Kind of our heroes like our demigods, and whereas these other ones are like our vampires, our werewolves, our monsters. And these are kind of our natural enemies that kind of balance each other out. So like that's kind of the main purpose of our universe. Kind of this place where myth and old legends and things like that all can fit all together at one place and make sense. And so that's what was our main purpose, because we love all these things, and we love the Universal monster movies, we love superheroes, we love cryptids, we love mythology. We're like, let's put it all together, and not only all together where it's like a kind of a hodgepodge or a Frankenstein's monster, but actually make it make sense. Kind of like, I think some of the problem with Marvel and DC you run into sometimes, because there's so many writers. It's like, Greek mythology and Norse mythology are simultaneously true. How the heck did that happen? Or like all these different things are simultaneously happening. It's like, wait a minute. Like this is kind of contradicting itself. And so for us, we're like, let's just get all this groundwork done and make this thing actually make sense completely.
Yeah. Awesome. I love that. And man, you name drop so many of my like little favorite earmarks. Like throughout this conversation, I heard things like Gothic literature. I heard things like Universal monsters, like cryptids, something like some mythologies, and like even just what you shared about the Warden being kind of like the light in a dark world. I'm like, I love things that lean on that. You know what I mean? I love that. I don't like, as much as I love like a gritty kind of grounded like vigilante story, you gotta have hope. You gotta actually have the heroism in it. Otherwise it just becomes, not for me. We'll say that. It's not to my taste.
Yeah. And I completely agree.
And so I appreciate this, man. It confirms what I've already suspected reading some of your issues, man, and it definitely makes me excited to see what's ahead for IronClad.
Yeah. And like, sorry.
Yeah. No, please.
Well, I was actually going to mention, so two things. Is one that like our kind of our the purposes of our story. So we don't ever like try to like cover politics or anything like that, but we do like to make statements. And we make statements of things we can all get behind. So like as you're saying, like we love focusing our stories on like hope and justice and truth and sacrifice and these things that we can all get behind. So like actually the kind of with the Warden, as you'll see later down the line, is each book, after this first arc, he'll be facing off against a villain, and that villain will represent a philosophy or ideology that is anti-human or anti, like nihilism or being or someone who's sadistic, stuff like that. And the Warden will have to defeat them not only physically but almost defeat their ideology as well. And also on top of that, our overall universe. So we're not just vigilantes and superheroes. We're actually lots of things. So we cover many different genres. We have everything from vigilantes to actually monster hunters, and even our next book called Devil's Tongue is actually about we call a horror western. So it takes place in the Appalachian Mountains in the 1990s, kind of like a modern cowboy is kind of protecting this child from this horrible monster in the woods. And you'll find out there's different connections to even the Warden and stuff like that throughout everything, but it's all very subtle. We kind of describe our universe is being connected the same way that Alien and Blade Runner were connected. That kind of very loose connection. There's things that cross over eventually.
Awesome. You kind of teased like an upcoming project. Is there any kind of timeline for that project? Or is that not released yet? Okay.
Well, so on our website, actually, I'll get into that. You can find a timeline. So we'll show you the first, I think, 5 books so far. And that book, Devil's Tongue, will come out right after the Warden 1 is finished, so those first 6 issues. So right now it's planning on starting in probably 2027, just because we're only able to put about 3 to 4 issues a year. But let's say we start going. I mean, our goal eventually is probably to do about 21 to 30 issues a year. Or that translates about 3 to 4 books a year. So that's kind of our main goal. But we hope to go as fast as possible, or not as fast as possible. We want to go at a good speed, actually, where we're also giving people enough stuff, but also not destroying ourselves by releasing so much stuff that people get overwhelmed. But so Devil's Tongue right now will be probably beginning art production in the next probably in 2027. But actually, it's already been written and edited. The script's already done. In fact, the script for the Warden 2 is almost done. So like we try to write ahead. So we're never the bottleneck, because a lot of times writing can become a bottleneck, if not the art. So we want to be able to make sure that we have all the scripts done, and the artists just go instead of just waiting for us to get the next issue or chapter out.
Yeah. Awesome, man. Well, I want to be sensitive to your time. I know we hit a lot of the questions I hope to do, but I did want to create a space because, again, I want to on-ramp as many people that might be watching my video that haven't heard of you guys to hopefully have an opportunity to check out your books, to look into it, to maybe buy an issue or two, or just to follow along. Is there anything else you'd like to promote or speak to,
Sure.
Whether it's the Warden, IronClad, or what you have going on? Again, I just want to create kind of a final area for you to promote it before we, before I say thank you and, we go on our merry way.
Yep. So one last thing I wanted to mention was actually the Vault, which is a thing on our website where we're starting very, very soon. Or it just started, but we're trying to promote it a lot more. Basically, the Vault is a place in which the government organization, Division 13, that's kind of in our books, has a database of all of files and evidence about our character. So it's kind of like an immersive part of our world you can get involved into. So right now, there's actually, you can go there, you can read stuff about the Warden, like a criminal profile or a psychological profile, or some like grainy pictures and different things like that. And so we want to be able to make this vault, which kind of has these things where people can read and consume stuff about our world in the meantime while they're waiting for books, because that's also a way to build community as well. Because like we love lore, we're nerds, we love lore. So like, lore from video games. I mean, video games do it so well. And so comics don't do that as much. They don't kind of immerse you into it. It's kind of, read the book from start to finish and it's over. But we were trying to have things for afterwards. Like, okay, now you can read this and this and that, and things will unlock and things will like kind of flow naturally, and you'll see different like teases and things like that throughout. So really, like, I mean, kind of if I was trying to sell somebody on IronClad Comics, I'd say like we're really trying to create the new myth for the 21st century, but also to rebuild stories that are almost like these classic fairy tales with modern twists, and have these immersive things you can really sink your teeth into and kind of be a part of, like creating this next huge thing that we're trying to be able to do for the kind of the world, like it's because we always wanted something like this. We're like, let's do it ourselves. Let's give people something they really like, and that's kind of our whole purpose.
Awesome. Cool. Well, I love hearing that. I love hearing that that's on the website for people that, again, want to venture further. Maybe they have checked out the Warden, they want to dig deeper into this world. That you already have like breadcrumbs of that out now. It sounds like, right, on this.
Exactly. Thing? Yep. Exactly. Awesome. And things will keep coming out more. I just stay tuned. More and more stuff is already on the way.
Awesome. Very cool. So like you said, the website, cons, Kickstarter. Do you guys have like an email list? Are there any other ways that people can get connected to you as well? And is that information available on the website, or
Yes.
how can they connect? Okay.
Yeah, most of the information for signing up for email list is on our website. We also are on every single social media you can think of: Instagram, TikTok, X, Substack just recently, Discord. You name it, YouTube, we're on it. So that's kind of we're trying to really build out all that stuff so we can hit from all angles.
Awesome. Well, very cool. Well, David, thank you so much for your time. You are welcome back anytime. And thank you for the Warden. Like I said, I am a fan. I'm really excited to see what you and Cody have to cook up down the line. And just thank you so much for being on the channel.
Yep. And thank you for having me. I'm glad you liked it.
Absolutely.
I hope you enjoyed today's interview. Please don't forget to give this video a like, a comment, and maybe share with a friend. Thanks, everyone. Bye.